humans are returning. They're hunting us.
What's our plan?
We're heading back to Pandora, but this time, we're underwater. Jake Sully and the Na'vi are back, but uh-oh, bad news. So are those pesky humans. Directed by James Cameron, this soaking wet sequel restarts the battle for Pandora, introducing Sully and his family to new allies and one very familiar old villain. We're gonna break down just how Colonel Quaritch is even back in this one, plus we'll get into just how this story can support all the sequels Cameron has planned for it, and it all has to do with this guy. But before we get into it, I have to warn you, we're about to spoil this whole movie, so if you haven't seen it yet or you don't want to know, you've got no excuse. Here's your spoiler warning. Now's the time to hop on your nearest flying reptile and make for the wild blue yonder while we do this.
Fly!
Fly?
Okay, now that we're past the spoiler warning, let's dive right in. Get it? Dive. The battle for Pandora never ended. It just got postponed, and in this movie, the humans are back to seize control of Pandora, waging war on the native Na'vi and burning everything in their path. Jake and Neytiri have a family now, and they're just fighting to protect their kids through the whole movie. Colonel Miles Quaritch is back as the main villain. We'll get into that in a second, and his assault on Jake and Neytiri's family drives them to a different part of the planet, where they eventually join forces with the Metkayina, a seafaring species similar to the forest-dwelling Na'vi.
There's 3 times as many characters, more characters. The world is bigger. The stakes are higher.
This all leads to an intense final battle between Jake Sully and the resurrected Colonel Quaritch that includes a huge sinking ship sequence where almost everyone makes it out alive. In the end, Jake and Neytiri's oldest son, Neytiri, is killed in the fight, and Avatar Quaritch is saved from drowning by his own son, Spider, who we'll explain in a second. The film ends as Avatar Quaritch wakes up, ready to resume his mission to kill Jake Sully. Okay, I know that's a lot to lay on you all at once. Here's a little recap to show how we got there.
Jake's a bit more of a warrior this time, so I wanted to give him a bit more of an animalistic feel. He's not necessarily as human as he was 10 years ago. He has adapted.
The film opens more than a decade after the first one, and Jake and Neytiri are raising their little family in the jungles of Pandora when the humans and the RDA show up. And they just pick up right where they left off. They're gonna take Pandora's resources and wipe out any native species standing in their way. Colonel Miles Quaritch led the RDA's first conquest of Pandora in the first film, an endeavor he very much does not survive. Well, before he died, he made a backup of his memories and delightful personality, which makes sense. This already is a world where you can upload a version of yourself into a big blue cat person, so making a copy of Quaritch just makes sense. And yeah, this avatar version of him survives at the end, but even if he didn't, they can always make a new avatar, which means he's kind of immortal, or pretty close to it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Avatar Quaritch wakes up to a video of original Quaritch informing him of the situation, orders him to pick up where he left off, and also prioritize big-time revenge on Jake Sully. The revenge angle instantly becomes the priority, and that's mainly what drives Avatar Quaritch in this movie.
There's a vendetta aspect to what's going on, and that vendetta is against Jake Sully, and the reason for that vendetta is because he feels that he has been betrayed by someone who is supposed to be a brother to him. And as far as he's concerned, Sully basically spit in his eye and turned his back on him.
Switching gears, let's break down Sully and Neytiri's family. Neytiri is the oldest, next is his younger brother Loak, and their 8-year-old sister Took. They have also adopted the teenaged Kiri, who is played by Sigourney Weaver. Kiri is the avatar daughter of Dr. Grace Augustine. But there's also Spider, the human son Colonel Quaritch left behind on Pandora after most of the humans left the planet at the end of the first film. Spider adores Jake and Neytiri's family, but he also seems to have a desire to please the avatar version of his dear old dad. Anyway, stick around, we'll get more into that in a second. Anyway, Avatar Quaritch's onslaught on Jake and Neytiri and their kids forces them to flee the forest where the Na'vi live, and they hide in a coastal part of the planet where the Metkayina live and protect the reefs and wildlife. And for the second time in his existence as an Avatar Na'vi, Jake Sully assimilates himself into a foreign alien culture, learning the ways of the Metkayina, or the way of water, if you will. It's basically exactly what he does in the first movie, except it's his whole family this time. Jake, Neytiri, and the gang are the guests of the Metkayina under the condition that they don't bring the conflict with the humans along with them. Jake, of course, promises this, but that goes out the window pretty quickly once the Avatar Quaritch figures out where they are. There are lots of long, sweeping scenes of everybody swimming along with the alien sea life. But just as there are deadly creatures in Pandora's forests, there are also super deadly creatures in the ocean. Jake and Neytiri's son Loak almost dies when he gets attacked by a Pandora analog to a great white shark, but just as he's about to get eaten, he gets saved by a large whale-like creature.
There's always a bigger fish.
Thanks, Qui-Gon, but a whale is a mammal, not a fish. I wonder if that's the same thing on Pandora. Who cares? You get it. Moving on. Once the RDA forces show up to get revenge on Jake Sully, the Metkayina jump in and help fight the humans and save Jake and Neytiri's family. Or most of it. Like we said before, Jake and Neytiri's oldest son, Netayem, is killed saving his sisters in the final fight, which understandably sends both Jake and Neytiri into rage mode. But during the fight, the huge vessel the RDA forces bring in for support gets badly damaged and starts to sink, and it becomes a scramble for survival for everyone to just get out before it goes down. The film ends not long after this, with Jake, Neytiri, and their family mourning the loss of their son and Avatar Quaritch waking up, ready to terrorize them all over again. The first movie ends with most of the humans getting kicked off Pandora after getting handled by the Na'vi forces, but that wasn't the end. They just come back in bigger numbers with better gear. If you're wondering how James Cameron plans to stretch the series into multiple sequels, that should be your first indication. Nothing ever ends, and the humans aren't gonna just stop trying to raze Pandora just because they were met with resistance the first time. And at the end of The Way of Water, the humans and the RDA are all still there. Nobody's going anywhere, and this kind of invasion and stealing of resources isn't the kind of thing that just gets neatly wrapped up at the end of one movie. James Cameron has been in the press saying he wants to do as many as 5 sequels to the original Avatar film, and after seeing this one, you can kind of get a sense for how he intends to do that. First off, you have Avatar Colonel Quaritch. He's gonna come back to give Jake the business no matter what happens. He's basically Jake Sully's Agent Smith. You can kill him, but he's backed up, and until you destroy that backup, he can always just get re-downloaded into a new avatar. He'll really become Agent Smith once they have multiple versions of him running around at once. The other bit of story meat here is the human Quaritch's son, Spider, who is a semi-feral human teen at this point. He loves the Na'vi, but he also saved the avatar of his dad from dying in the big sinking boat sequence, something he doesn't share with the rest of the group. This is gonna come up at a very inconvenient time in one of the future films, even though if Avatar Quaritch had died, it really wouldn't have mattered. But regardless of what happens to Jake Sully, his family, Avatar Quaritch, or any of the rest of them, Earth's Resources Development Administration is going to plunder Pandora for its resources, and that right there is what will fuel years of more Avatar movies. The humans got their butts kicked in the first film, and now we're back to finish the job. The RDA fills in for the huge evil corporations like Weyland-Yutani or Cyberdyne Systems in James Cameron's movies. It is cold, unfeeling, and brutal. So while it seems like Quaritch, or some version of him, is the villain of the franchise, ultimately the RDA is the real villain, and the Na'vi and the Metkayina are gonna have their hands full, repelling them permanently. Okay, now it's time for some Easter eggs, and this time it works a little differently. The Way of Water is, after all, a James Cameron film, and it is very James Cameron-y, if that even is a thing. I mean, there are a handful of call-outs to other James Cameron films in the movie. The huge sinking boat should be a pretty obvious one. As Jake and Neytiri panic, trying to get their family out of the shipwreck alive, it definitely brings back memories of the first time James Cameron did something like that in a film about a huge ship that couldn't. Titanic. Also, Kate Winslet is in The Way of Water as Ronal the Medcaína. But Kim, you might say, I'm not much of a Titanic person. Terminator 2 was more my speed. Well, did you catch the shot of fiery devastation raining down on Pandora as the RDA ships made landfall? Echoing Judgment Day's opening scene, and what comes next is ground assault, and the RDA sends in killer mechs instead of T-800s. There is also a riff on this shot, when Quaritch holds the skull of his human form and then crushes it with his bare hands, happily leaving any humanity behind. When James Cameron's Abyss came out in 1989, the visual effects his team had to invent to make stuff like this possible was a pretty big deal. There's a small call out to this as the RDA forces are prepping for a marine assault on Pandora's reefs. And we mentioned Sigourney Weaver plays a de-aged Avatar version of herself as Kiri, and that's an Easter egg right there. What James Cameron movie is complete without her?
Get away from her, you bitch!
But what did you think of Avatar: The Way of Water? Do you think this story can sustain all the sequels James Cameron wants to do? Where do you think the story goes from here? Hit us with your best theories down in the comments. Anyway, I'm Kim Horcher. Thanks for watching this episode of Canon Fodder, and for more Avatar: The Way of Water, here's why you should care about it even if you hate big blue cats. How did you make it to the end of this video? Whatever, just don't forget to follow and subscribe to IGN wherever you like to watch.
Let's get it done.